Welcome back, Comics Cubers. I know it's been a while, but it's because there's been a lot of life updates on my end. I started a new job, actually, I started a new business. So if any of you need help with data analytics and consulting, please come talk to me. Also, if you need some people to just talk about comics with, please come talk to me. Need a host for your events when it comes to comics? Please come talk to me. Having said that, before I go on and introduce today's guest, I will say that I started a Patreon. So not like other Patreons where there's a lot of other tiers. This one is basically a tip jar. There's only one tier so far. It's basically $1 a month. It's basically just to keep me in business because I would just really like to keep the Comics Cube running. So please, if you like what I do, please head on over to Patreon. And if you're feeling generous, please just go ahead and pledge that dollar every month for the Comics Cube. Our guest today is Ronnie Del Carmen, a legend in the field of animation, and he talks about his journey from the Philippines to how he got to start working on Batman the Animated Series and how he eventually moved into feature animation with Prince of Egypt and eventually classic titles such as Up. He's the guy who did that heartbreaking beginning that we all talk about today. And also, as the co director of Inside Out, he also talks about his role in Inside Out 2, which is now the highest grossing animated film of all time. This is a really fun discussion. Let's get right to it. I will say, whenever I do talk to other legendary person in the animation industry, Dan Reba, you
Oh
get
yeah.
brought up a lot.
Oh really? I know Dan. We go way back in my early days in my career on animation, not knowing my left foot from my hand. I don't know. It was just a wonderful time to be with Dan. He's a
Yeah.
great guy.
So you grew up in the Philippines.
Yes, I did. I did. I grew up. I was a grown person by the time I got here to the US. I was already turning 30. I had two kids and I had to start my life all over again. And it was like I didn't figure that was going to be the case, but that's what happened. Yeah.
And as I understand it, while you were in high school, you were working on Apocalypse Now.
No, I graduated high school. I barely got out of there because the family's finances just crumbled, and all of my friends were going to college. As you know, you're graduating from high school. You put all of your applications to the colleges that you want to go to, entrance exams back then, and I got accepted at the premier tech university in the Philippines. That's Mapua Tech,
Yeah.
and it's not easy to actually into get past the entrance exam. And I figured that because I like calculus, I was kind of interested in it. I wanted to be an industrial engineer, so I took the entrance exam. But even when I was taking the entrance exam, I knew that we didn't have the finances for me to go to college. So I got accepted, but I couldn't go to college. I started working, and I my sister was working at Hemisphere Pictures. It was at the end of Buendia,
Mm.
behind the Zuelig building.
Oh,
And yes, it was there. That's where Hemisphere Pictures was, and she signed me up to the painting department, and I was the youngest person in the crew, and I had no idea what I was doing. I don't know how to work. I mean, I was 15, 16 years old, and nobody wanted me there. So they
that is
gave me all
that's
everybody wanted
illegal
to give me the
now.
yeah, they gave me all the crap jobs to do because they felt like, ah, who's this kid? Oh gosh, give him the crap jobs, which they did.
But probably a lot of learning on that job.
I think that socially is because I thought that my life was going to be that we were going to have a house and my dad was going to have a job and that I was going to go to college and all of those things that happen to be on rails for people when you're feeling comfortable about your life. And when all of that just flew out the window and we were not only poor, but the family was really separated from different in-laws and aunts and uncles. That future was barred for me, so I wasn't going to go to school, and I did not know how to work. You have no
Hmm.
skills. I didn't know how to behave as a worker, and I had to learn the very basics of how to be a worker, and how to be able to persist and you know learn as you go, and be able to deal with whatever comes at you. So, and that was a very, very, how do I put it? It's like being thrown in a deep end if you were a kid and kind of like, say, my friends are going to college, but no, you're going to be a laborer, son. Oh no. It was like it's one of those Twilight Zone curses where you felt like, oh, one day you were this person, and the next day, what? What happened? And the nightmare persisted for many years.
How did you discover art?
I was drawing since I was little. I don't know why. I was just drawing all over the place. I drew on the walls, got me in trouble. I drew in the backs of my notebooks in school,
Hmm.
got me in trouble with the teacher. And then my dad finds out, and I got in trouble with my dad. And my dad he was a very practical man, and he knows what's required of you in school. And what's required of you is to be able to follow instruction in school.
Yeah.
But I was filling my notebooks not with notes from the various classes. I was filling them with drawings, and he saw the drawings in my notebooks, and I got castigated. And I was like, "Oh gosh, drawing is bad news." So, but I persisted drawing, but I really didn't find any. I didn't find any practical kind of application to it at all for a long time.
When did that change for you?
It started to make sense when, well, I started to do drawing jobs in my late teens, like 16, 17. And people who had these like guilds that had annuals and they wanted caricatures to be printed in there,
Yeah.
like, and then I would get paid a little there. And then when I finally landed in a commercial arts vocational course for being a commercial artist, there was someone who's publishing a Filipino who's publishing a retelling of fairy tales, and he needed illustrations for it. So I took that as a side job. I was earning from drawing, which is a novelty that um, I thought that this was going to become like you one of those mall illustrators who would draw people's likeness in
Yeah.
pencil, those kind of things. And I hated those things. But I did a few of those just to make ends meet. But at the same time, it's like to be paid to come up with imagery and be known as the artist, to get a credit as the artist was novel. It was like that's I don't know that part because drawing, if you I grew up in Cavite City. You don't encounter a lot of artists. You have a lot of people who feel that they want to draw, want to become an architect and all that. But I have nothing. There's no point of reference that you could say that there's a career in the arts.
Yeah.
What's that?
All of the known painters are in the malls.
Yes, and and I don't understand what they're painting, and God knows whatever people might be buying. Um, I like museums, but most things that are in museums are from, decades and centuries past. And people who are making money as being an artist, or in Mabini back then, there was a lot of those for the tourist trade and for people to hang something in their homes. But I didn't figure that I was going to be interested in that kind of art either, because I don't have any art instruction until I happened onto UST. And only then it became clear to me that people can have a job in drawing by being in advertising. Which
Yeah, there we go.
that felt like, you mean you can go to work and people pay you to, oh, I have to have advertising production knowledge, how to apply this to print, and or well, mostly print back then. And you have to know these things. And it's like, okay, all right. So that starts to become like that's something.
I think it does say a lot, like because I saw you at Digicon back in
Yes, did you?
October.
Did you? All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad you caught us there. My
Uh,
son and I actually did talk there. Yeah.
and and I do think it says a lot that more a lot of the comic book community in the Philippines, a lot of the creators come from advertising.
Yes, because they paid money.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky to be retained, I mean, it's not lucrative, but it's respectable. What you do ends up in print, or it's a TV campaign, or it's the packaging. You get some pride in the workmanship that, my work gets seen. And that was the end all and be all of what becomes an art career back in those days. My copywriter friend in one of the smaller agencies, my first one, we both collected comics
Mm-hmm.
that was at that time was novel. They were coming in regularly through Phil bars, and we collected Daredevil and all these other comics, and we pretended. Here I was in my mid-20s, pretending that we could work in comics because we loved the narrative and felt like, well, it's fun to think about, but who gets to do comics, right?
Uh,
Especially all the way here to in Manila.
I'm working on the timeline here. When you say you're in your 20s reading Daredevil, I am assuming that is Frank Miller's Daredevil.
Yeah, well, it was the end of Frank Miller's Daredevil, and then it was still not Frank Miller drawing, but it's Frank Miller writing, and David Mazzucchelli was drawing
Mm-hmm.
then, and this was the makings of what would be Born Again, right? And it was fantastic because it felt more literary and more kind of more hard-boiled cinema when you're following it. It didn't feel like a superhero comic book, and both my friend and I were copywriters felt like, why wouldn't it be great to write one of these? Well, so I pretended a lot to be either David Mazzucchelli or wanted to be Bill Sienkiewicz because I was a big fan of his New Mutants.
Yeah.
And so comics was always kind of like the pipe dream. But before that also it's kind of like I would like to draw spaceships and monsters for George Lucas because of Star Wars, or design monsters, for Ridley Scott because of Aliens. But that's a pipe dream in Manila. It's the kind of things that I can understand now coming back to Manila, that I can feel like all of these young people have all these dreams walking around with them.
And now they have a lot of opportunities because of the
They have a
internet.
lot more because of the internet, and you can be hired right off. I mean, I have actually contracted people when I was at Netflix, people who work in Manila to do
Mm-hmm.
work for me. And I feel like, man, I'm glad to close this loop. I'm so happy to be able to make this happen. I'm paying someone in Manila to design something for me. But back then, me being myself being someone in my 20s, it felt like that's not gonna happen. But I feel like I want to say to all these young people who are thinking, well, not only is it like you were right, it's completely possible, but it is also imminently in your hands to be able to make happen.
Mm. More power now to
You
the
have a lot more latitude with what becomes of your career, with what you can exert, of course, but you can actually go and be virtually present when certain events that, that the industry you want to belong to, you can participate in one way or the other, be seen,
yeah. You don't
right?
have to physically go to a
Oh my
convention.
God, that was the deal. And this used to be my adage that I would tell people. Ambition is great and skills are wonderful, but geography matters. This was because that's how I solved my problem
Yeah.
without me thinking that that was going to solve the problem. But only when I moved to Los Angeles did I essentially drop into the center of what is the industry I want to be part of, even though I was shaking my head the whole time. It's like, this is no one's gonna want to hire me. I don't know anything. But I was in the right place for it. These days, all of these places to be seen, ways that for your portfolio to be looked at,
Hmm.
it feels like go to town, man. Go and do everything you can, even though
Make an
you don't make it.
Instagram, do it,
Yeah.
put it all up there.
Yes.
What migrating is really hard, and I know this because I've tried.
Oh,
So,
yeah. So
but but
you know how that goes, right?
what prompted you to drop everything in your 30s and then go to Los Angeles?
Nothing other than that my dad had migrated on a long shot, a Hail Mary to get us out of abject poverty.
Hmm.
And he's my hero. He migrated to the US, and because of the immigration laws that were constantly changing, he happened onto a loophole where there was an amnesty about being a non-immigrant who was in the US could apply for permanent residence. And because of that, he applied for immigrant status. And because of that, he became a citizen. So I didn't see him for 11 years,
Oh, wow.
waiting for his status to change. And when he applied, we still had a long wait in the Philippine embassy for us to be able to be considered for being immigrants, such that by the time when he applied for anything, his status got better over time. But it took 11 years.
Hmm.
And when the petition arrived, I was working in an advertising agency. I had my own client list as an art director and a partnership with a copywriter at Lintas, and I felt like it wasn't making me a lot of money. I had like started a family with my girlfriend. We have 2 kids. I'm thinking, if ever this dream of coming to the United States was going to happen, I don't think it's going to happen anymore.
It should have happened already.
It probably should have, because I
Yeah.
am turning 30 in this year in 1989. And then the petition showed up. As soon as I gave up on, well, I'm going to make a go of it here. And my brothers and I we were all looking at each other. It's like, we're the only ones left. Mom and dad are there. My baby sister's there. My oldest sister is there. We, the boys, we're probably stuck here. And we had to face that fact that we're not going anymore. Okay. So that's that, right? And when the petition arrived, I was almost like, great, wait, well, but I'm building a life here now, and I don't know what I'm going to do there when I get there too. I mean, what am I going to work on? Advertising, maybe. So it was a I better find out, because it was something that my dad had worked on for years to make happen.
Hmm.
And so when we landed, my brothers and I was sure that the whatever it was that got me there was going to change its mind. And it was like that I was going to go back to Manila, having failed. And for 3 months, I was waiting to find a way to get a job. I was looking. I couldn't find work in advertising because none of my credentials equate to a job in advertising in Los Angeles. They're looking for someone else, and I don't fit the bill. And of course, because my pedigree speaks of something that they're not looking for. And I almost felt like, well, at 3 months, and my brother's already working in a hotel restaurant with my mom.
Yeah.
They'd taken a paying job already. I was determined to make my job be about drawing or something, but I was failing. I was not getting anything. And I saw a newspaper ad. I was looking for an artist. I'm going, a newspaper ad, a want ad. In, and it happened to be a want
Kids,
ad.
newspapers, or things that you used to
Newspapers,
buy.
the classified ads. And then I noted that it's in Burbank, and we happen to live in Burbank, and my geography is bad. And I'm thinking, where is this? And I looked at the map, and I'm thinking, that is not far. It's at least a drive. I still don't have a license. I don't know really how to drive. And I borrowed my dad's car, and he knew full well I didn't have a license. And he's like, I'm gonna get lost with a Thomas guide. I showed up and I said, I clipped the ad because I'm such a rube. I was looking at the window, I was like, you have an opening for, I was like, oh yeah. Yeah, it's like, do you have a book? I said, what's that? Do you have a book? I was like, I have a portfolio. That's the same thing. Oh, so I handed it to them. It's just like, okay, we'll call you. Okay. And I go back and I told my dad, it's like, I answered a one ad today. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. And then that evening they called. I was just like, oh, can you go to this agency on Wilshire? And they're like, oh, yeah, sure. And I asked my dad, where's Wilshire? And I'm looking at the Thomas guide. Where am I? I was like, okay, this is what you're going to do. You're going to do this. You're going to, wait, I'm going to go on the freeway? I don't have never even gotten on the freeway yet.
And you don't have a license.
I don't have a license. I was terrified. You're going to be fine. My dad was like, I answered it and I went up the agency and I went to reception. It's like, I am here because the studio sent me to. This is my demeanor because I'm always, as an immigrant, not from there, I'm asking permission all the time. Am I
Yeah.
the right person? And then so, so it's like, sure, you're from continuity? Right, good. Go through this door, so and the art director will be with you. Okay. I go there. Beautiful, beautiful agency. I was like, oh my God. And there's this art department, kind of like, oh, look at all the art materials, fantastic. And then the person who's from the studio that hired me shows up. It's Neal Adams. Neal Adams Studio of Continuity, who I knew about. And I knew it was the studio, but I didn't know Neal himself was going to show up because he's on the East Coast. Here I am in the West Coast. And we worked together the whole afternoon, and he told me what to do. And all the time, I'm not fan freaking out, but the fan is like inside me. It's like, this is freaking Neal Adams, and I'm working with him. And he was very generous, and it was very, very good. It's just like, you did good work today. Okay, I'll meet you at the studio. Well, I drove back without crashing the car, and got back to Burbank, and then stuff like, are you available for more work? It's like, well, sure. Yeah, they'll cut you a check. All right. They cut me a check, and I was doing comps for advertising agencies in Manila, in the Philippines, and I do a ton of work. I'm very fast, and they were saying, "Well, you did good work, and you did a lot of stuff, and here you go." And I got like a couple of $100, like about $300 or $400, and I'm feeling like, cool, thank you, and we'll be in touch. All right. What? They paid me this much for those? It was just pencil and some markers. I could have hand lettered the Bible. And then I go back to my dad, and my dad is like, look what they paid me. It's just like, oh, you made more money today than I did the whole week. That was the one confirmation that says that it's viable. It happened by happenstance, it's accident. It's not skill. I'd say it's luck, but I believe in that you could be standing right at the right place at the right time. And even though fate dealt me and my family a very raw deal for a very long time, that was the beginning of things changing. That my promise to my wife is that, like, if I don't make it here, I'm coming home because
Mhm.
this is not worth it to me to. to be here and be struggling while I can be there and be struggling. His studio, even though that it was great to be there, I was very, very grateful. There were other opportunities. I was in the middle of the entertainment industry, and I'm doing comps for movie posters and doing storyboards and stuff like that. And I wasn't getting enough information. A friend of mine, the French, Sylvain Dupre, who does storyboard for Ridley Scott and also has kind of been mentored by Mobius himself, who also worked at Continuity New York, comes to visit and he tells me, it's like, you should get out of here. What? You're too good for this place. You can you can work somewhere else. But he's very worldly and kind of very, very smart. And he drives a nice car. And him giving me advice and trying to help me out was I felt very grateful for his encouraging words to get out of here. You're better than this place. And that's when I started seeking more work. And the only work to be had there was animation. So that's how I fell into it.
And this my show is called The Comics Cube, and we mentioned Dan Reba earlier. So I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure that most of my audience will be most interested in the time you spent on a real legendary television show called Batman the Animated Series.
Yes, yes. I was very, very lucky. Again, all of that was about luck. Um, being working for Neal Adams, who's a premier Batman artist, right? It
Mhm.
seems like it. I fell into animation. I worked on a small TV show and I worked at all told 2.5 months to learn anything and everything about animation, which I know zero. And I didn't even want to be in animation. I swore off not ever doing anything in animation, but I learned a little bit in 2.5 months. And then I went back to the Philippines to see my wife, and I was like, oh, it's great. But when I come back, I'm not going to have a job. This is 1991. And by the time I come back, I had to go and like hit the studios. It was hiring, and no one was hiring. It was the wrong time of the year to be looking because all the studios who had animated series have all crewed up already, including Warner Brothers. And notoriously, Batman the Animated Series had already started. They have a crew.
Mhm.
And months earlier, before I went back to the Philippines, there was a small bootleg tape of the tests that Bruce Timm and his crew had made to sell the show. Went all around animation, and we gawked at it, like looking at it while we were in this small animation. It's like, oh my God, what is that? Who's doing that? And of course, you find out it's like everybody wants to be on that show. They're already making this. Oh, they're full up. Nobody's going to be able to get there. But when I come back, all my friends already got their own work already, and I just asked them, "Do you find any work?" Hey, well, just drop your portfolio. Warner Brothers, they have Tiny Toons and Batman animated series. They're not hiring, but at least get seen. So I dropped off my portfolio there. I felt like, oh my God, what's on the walls is like, shoot, this is beautiful. It's even better as drawings. Ah, and my heart sank because they're not looking. They're not going to hire anyone. I left my portfolio. I left my portfolio, let's just say on a Wednesday, Thursday. I got a call back to show up Monday. And I sat in front of Kevin Altieri, one of the directors. He says like, yeah, you're pretty good. All that. Yeah, I put you on my crew, but you got to talk to the producer. It's like, I'll schedule you with a meeting with a producer who happens to be Bruce Timm, and come back. I came back the next day. I sat in Bruce's office and he looked at it. Look, yeah. So, what do you want to do? And I said, like, character design? And he said, nope, you're doing storyboards. Okay, you start Monday. Right. That
You
was
know,
my injury.
you are credited as a character designer on IMDb.
Yes, I don't know why. IMDb does whatever it wants, but because I did all those jobs at Batman animation, I did character design, I did storyboards, I did background, I did props, I did all of it. When Bruce hired me, he didn't know that how much or how little experience I had storyboarding for animation. I learned on the job, but at the same time, I think that, and God bless him, he was, what happens in the animation industry is that all of the known players in animation are hired. They're already situated. And then also the people that Bruce wants to hire, um, um, a lot of them have already kind of very kind of distinct inclinations that he's not looking for. So he ended up with a very young crew who are malleable, who have interest, which I didn't know at the time because I was mystified that he would hire me when they weren't hiring. And he
But
hired me on a storyboarding job that I was not that qualified to do.
but that was probably a very good thing for Batman the Animated Series, right? Because it was
I think
such
it
a
was. It was a very young, motivated crew who wanted to do things in excellent ways that wasn't what, those very experienced journeymen would do without grumbling. And that for us, it felt like it was a new frontier where we can do anything. And we didn't get paid a lot of money, but it was still a great job to be working with people who are very, very motivated and spirited and to influence each other while we were making it. It was kind of a small, like, university of getting better doing the work together. And also Bruce being kind of a very high watermark of what he wants to do and accomplish. So we were very motivated and inspired. But to me, I was just very lucky to be there that I was going to show off what all the skills that I have. And still faced with the idea that, oh my God, you don't know anything about animation. You better learn fast, which I did. I tried to learn as much as I can. I stayed there at night. I photocopied instruction books and I asked questions. The cinematic language was you need to learn how to be able to think like not only a director, but an editor. And film language was something that you had to learn. And you can't get taught that unless theoretically, unless you were handling film narrative. And
Mhm.
we were handling uh 22-minute films each
Basically, yeah.
episode. And so each of us are given about 10 to 11 minutes of cinematic language to direct right off. And but you're also in charge of the backgrounds, you're in charge of the props, you're in charge of reading the script, and so you're your own mini kind of director. And then also it allows you to hone your drawing skills so that it can be translated in animation. And because of that, each of us were in competition with each other to draw the best that we can because given the timetable, we have to that our storyboards look like comic books,
Were
which is
you
not necessary.
were you already a Batman fan? I know you were a Frank Miller, David Mazzucchelli fan.
No, I was a Batman fan because of, again, the Neal Adams books and all of the other DC books that got reprinted in the Philippines. Jim Aparo was like
Hmm.
was a Batman artist, as well as Neal and Dick Giordano. And but I consumed all of those things because they were reprinted in the Philippines by National Bookstore. But the
But
Marvel
only
books,
select issues.
select issues because but they also reprinted some of Jack Kirby's Demon,
Yeah.
and Commandy, which gave you a taste of Jack Kirby. But I also collected whatever I can of Marvel stuff with the Fantastic Four and Thor and all the titles that you can get hold of. So I was in amongst people who were comic book fans at Batman Animated Series when we had breaks with Bruce, myself, Glenn Murakami. We would ape artists. We would draw like my favorite was to draw like Gene Colan, and then
Oh
my other
wow.
favorite was to be able to ink like Klaus Janson, and of course um, Bill Sienkiewicz. But we were also fans of Love and Rockets and Mike Mignola and on all of this and Kevin Nolan. So all of those things we get to play at drawing and inking our storyboards, which is not going to look like there's a style guide. But we get kind of our jollies being able to draw in certain ways as part of our job
Amazing.
that it felt like, oh, this is fantastic. And not only that, you have a major enabler in Bruce, who's such a supreme artist that we would sometimes sit whole afternoons just
This,
talking comics. We have work to do. It's like, oh my God. It's like, okay, get up. We got work to do.
well, you mentioned about like aping other artists, but
Yeah.
obviously during Batman the Animated Series, you guys had to draw like Bruce.
Yes, which is to me, a lot of people felt like, oh, you have to draw, in the house style of Batman animated series, which to me was very, very educational because animation is not very forgiving of detail. You're supposed to understand that a line that can be replicated by many people is something that is necessary in animation. That's why the character designs are simplified to the point that many people can draw on the style. So that the more complicated that you make your character design, the more pencil mileage and the longer it'll take to finish the show. But there's an artfulness in Bruce's design that it gets easily translated in animation, and it allows you to also simplify, which is something that you do as an artist eventually. Once you're young, you feel like, all this complication and detail is what you want to do. When you mature, what you really want is simplicity and communication in the simplest terms. And it's good to be able to have that as part of your job. The simplification is essentially a bonus for you because you get to distill the essence of what needs to be represented in your work as telling a story. But that was wonderful in terms of being able to function on the on the house style. Then also I get to express my own way of interpreting Bruce's style because we were comic book fans. We also dabbled in comics. We did the holiday special,
Yeah.
and I wasn't going to be doing the holiday special, but Paul Dini had a story, the bet, that not everybody wanted to take on, but I felt like I want to take it on. But it featured the two cute Batman girls of Harley and Ivy, and I felt like that's fun to do. I get to do Betty and Veronica, essentially.
Basically.
Yes, and Paul's such a very collaborative writer. It's just like gave me the outline of the story. It's like run with it,
Let
and
me
I had
ask
a ball.
let me ask you something about Batman the Animated Series, which is, did you ever in your lifetime, your whole time working there,
Yeah.
did you ever think Harley Quinn would become as big as she became?
No, no, you did. I didn't think so because she was so entertaining. And I mean, Paul and Bruce created her. I didn't think that she would because there's so many in the Rose Gallery to feature. Um, but if I paid attention to myself, I should have been able to make that conclusion because she was fun to draw and behave as a character. I mean, Arlene Sorkin, who voiced her, created essentially her demeanor and attitude. Felt like it's fun to have a story that features her because um, she did not have the angst of the counterpoint of the angst of a Batman, right? And the
Yeah.
earnestness of Dick Grayson as Robin. She was just a free spirit that felt like you can do a lot with as a counterpoint to the landscape of the world that was rather dark, grim, and it had very, very heavy themes at times. She was a necessary antidote because even though the Joker was very entertaining and Mark kills it every time, um, he was the one person that was carrying, I feel, as a character who carries a lot of that love. Of course, the couple, Harley with him, was genius.
I noticed in the episodes that you're credited in,
Uh-huh.
you are credited in every single Batgirl episode. And I was
Oh,
wondering if that
really?
was
I
intentional.
was maybe because the crew of Batman, Bruce Timm, myself, and a few others. Well, there's a coin of the realm as the ability to be able to draw a cute girl even if you don't draw it for the movie or for the series, your ability to actually draw a cute girl is somewhat you're afforded a certain celebrity. You have a certain kind of superpower that you can draw a cute girl. And because I'm a big Betty and Veronica fan, and who doesn't like to draw a cute girl? I asked, but my answer is everybody likes them. And both Bruce and myself, when we have a time to in the afternoon to just goof around, and we actually don't have that time. We're just kind of like, well, we're gonna go. We'll draw either superheroes or cute girls. And because I tended to want to keep at it because it felt like Bruce likes them and we kind of do little doodles and pass it around over beers and all that. There was a collection of beer drawings that went around that somebody has collected of all of us when we were drinking beers and drawing superheroes and cute girls. That people compiled photocopies of it and went all over the place. And I don't even have a copy of it. But because of that, I think that they wanted me to draw her in storyboards because that means like, well, here we are, physical drawings of that girl. I would draw her model. I would draw her for anybody's title cards or whatever. Draw her with new outfits. It's just fantastic. So that when I did the holiday special, and there was a time when Harley and Ivy were gonna go shopping on Bruce's credit cards. I did a whole page, a montage of them shopping in different outfits and all because that was fun to do. And by then it felt like that's like rolling off a log
Yeah.
because I do that all the time. You know, it's just fun. And I like to do it. I'm such a big fan of the mad artists like um, Jack Cole and all these other classic artists. Um, it felt like it's very cartoony representation would be fun. I mean, Jaime Hernandez also likes to draw uh, Maggie and Hopi that way
Yeah.
in the earlier issues. So I felt like that was fun to do, and that's why Bruce gives me those things because it felt like, yeah, the episode with the Mad Hatter with Alice, I just had to draw the models.
Okay.
I was like, well, yeah, I'm gonna draw that. And my storyboards for the Batgirl episode felt like I put all the poses that I can so that hopefully the animation studio gets it, would follow them. And I would number the poses. I would look at the timing sheets when it gets like, oh, I hope they included those movements in there. Of course, you're not in control of that, but it was fun to do. And they saw that I was having fun with it. So I keep getting those, which is great.
Before I ask you about Inside Out,
Mm,
there's a couple of movies in between Batman the Animated Series and Inside Out that I'm really curious about your experience in.
sure.
And one is because of the animation in it. It's The Prince of Egypt.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
like, what was it like working on that? And like, was there really a big this effort to make it look
Yes.
different from everything else?
Yes, it was. It was the beginning of a new studio, and I had wanted to go to Disney because they were the 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 scuttlebutt was that they were making Tarzan, and here I was. I already finished Batman animated series. I directed on Freakazoid, and a friend of mine had moved to animation feature in Disney, and so I was like, man, I get a sequence which is about 2 pages of script, maybe three, and I will work on it for 2 months. So like, what? Yeah, for 2 months. How many drawings is that? It's like, well, 200 drawings. 200, that's it. 300 maybe. It's like, for 2 months, that's what you're doing in one sequence? Yeah. It's like, and how much are you getting paid? That's a lot of money for such little work. I want that job. But especially because it was Tarzan, I wanted to get to work on Tarzan. So I prepared a portfolio to go there. And but a friend of mine, another friend of mine, good friend of mine, is like had got hired at DreamWorks. It's just like, oh, they're accepting portfolios here. They need story artists. You're gonna drop. Yeah, I'm just gonna drop my portfolio over at Disney. Oh, okay, I'll drop it over there. And I dropped it over. And then it came back. It was like, your style was too cartoony. It was like,
Oh, for
wow.
Tarzan.
For no, for Prince of Egypt.
Oh, okay,
And
for Prince of Egypt. Okay.
it was like, really? Because, well, okay. Well, I wasn't trying to get there. I was trying to work on Tarzan. So I got my portfolio back and I stayed with Freakazoid for a little bit longer. And then afterwards, I was going to go and submit to Disney. And then DreamWorks calls again. It's like, so you applied here? Like they said, yeah, I know. Can you drop off your portfolio? Um, I don't know if you know, but I already did. I dropped it off, and you guys already passed on it. So you feel like, no, 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 bring it in again. Okay, but I think you may not have been talking to the same person I was talking to. Uh, okay, sure. So I drove all the way over there again and dropped it off. It's like on a Friday. On a Monday, I got a call. It's like, so we'd like to hire you. Are you kidding? You don't even want. And they hired me. And I thought, like, cool. And back then they were doing signing bonuses. It's like, what? Wow. I left and I joined Prince of Egypt. But what's difficult is that the animation industry back then, there was only one game in town, and that was Disney, if you're making animated features. All of the professionals that are working on animated features are locked up at Disney. DreamWorks with Jeffrey, he's trying to lure all these people from Disney.
Mm,
But what Disney does is that starts paying them more so that they won't leave. So they don't. So when they were saying no to me, they were still hoping that they were going to lure people from Disney. And then a few months later, they noticed that nobody was jumping ship. They had to take people with no feature experience. And even then, it took them many, many months to give me a story assignment because they didn't know what I was capable of. And what I do know is that the opening reels, the reels of The Prince of Egypt made me nervous
okay.
because it was beautiful and the music was beautiful and it looked epic. And it felt like you guys are doing something amazing. Yeah, I'll work on this. And I believed in it so much, but I was disappointed that they didn't use me for a long time until when they used me and I bombed pitching animated feature style to Jeffrey, the directors and producers, and I felt like maybe I'm gonna go back to TV. I'm failing. I wasn't succeeding, but I love the production. There's a difference between storyboarding for animated content for TV and animation for features.
What's the
And
difference?
the difference is that in TV, it's very set in stone. Once you get a script, you cannot change anything in the script. You can't touch a word of it. And not only that, you have to do it to measure, and you have to do it within 2 weeks to be able to do it, 2 or 3 weeks maybe. And you submit it to the director, and the director will make some notes, change this, add that. It's like, okay, and then get submitted. Not a lot is going to be changed, and then it will never come back to you anymore. It'll come back, it's already animated, and then they're going to cut it with sound and finish it. In animated features, they will take a whole chunk of time with a written script and prove that the movie is working by doing animatics, by storyboarding it over and over again and pitching it. And by pitching it, I mean that you pin the drawings on a board and then with a stick, you point at it and say the dialogue and describe what's happening in the drawings, which I found really silly. I
It
said, like,
sounds it sounds funny.
I said, like, now this is your script that you've paid your writers to write, that you've read and approved, that I wrote on a strip that's underneath the drawing with an image that describes in the script. But I'm going to stand with a stick, point to the drawing, and read the dialogue that your writer wrote and describe the imagery that was on the script in a room full of you, and you get to go like, hmm, you mean you couldn't understand that that's what you guys approve. And then, but every time I pitch, people felt like not working. Oh, this is wrong. And they're like, and I'm holding the stick after having pitched it, and I feel like I failed, and I'm completely flabbergasted. It's like, but I didn't write that, and I certainly didn't create this moment. What am I doing wrong? Right? And then they feel like, we're going to rewrite it. This is wrong. You and they tear it apart. And I feel like, I have this sinking feeling that I just failed. And it kept happening over and over again. But everyone was happily doing this thing, pitching, reading the dialogue, and they're like, oh my God, I don't like this. I'm 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 gonna fail each time because I have to follow the script. I'm gonna delineate it, and yet they're gonna hate it. And I'm the only one holding the responsibility, apparently, for making this work. I don't think so. I didn't like it. A year later, after failing and already talked to one of the directors, Brenda Chapman, maybe I should go. This is not working for you. It's not working for me. It's like, let's call it what it is because it isn't really happening, is it? And she says, no, just hang in there. And like, I want you to pay attention to the characters' eyes and what they're saying. And like, okay, I don't know what that's going to do, but sure. I was already kind of very frustrated and very uh, motivated to just end it until they give me the same assignment that I've been bombing in a year later. It was Ramesses being visited by Moses before the 10 plagues. I've told this story many times because I feel that this was my wake-up moment. And I feel that this is something that's important for all of you, anybody out there who aspires to be a storyteller and you're drawing and you feel that you, as a creative individual, are waiting for your validation, right? To me, it's this. When I was given the script, that sounds very generic about the meeting between Moses and Ramesses, did not give me anything that was different from what it's been for a year. And I was going to pitch it in the following week. And I feel like, well, I'm not going to do anything different from what I think is described here. But I also felt like, you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of me and my brother when we were trying to stay away from my mom when she wants us to take a nap in the afternoons. And what we did was we covered the blanket and pillows with another blanket to make it look like we were sleeping. And then we would skip out and play outside. And then we would be kind of like AWOL, right? And then while we were playing outside on the tree, like little monkeys, my mom would wonder, where are the boys? Why aren't they taking a nap, right? And we would see her in front of the house while we're looking down. It's like, there's mom. And she's screaming our names in the neighborhood, Ronaldo, Enrique. Oh man, you're gonna get it. So what we do is climb down the tree, go in the back, and then come inside the house and feel the what? We were here the whole time. I didn't see you. Oh, you started screaming and we heard you, but we didn't leave. We were just here. And we would be like laughing. We got one over mom. And it felt like, yeah, we're going to do that again. That's for sure. So to me, it felt like Ramesses and Moses, because they grew up together, but I felt like they were mischievous kids when they were younger, which is in the script. So I pictured that they must have done this when they were younger. Because dad, the authority figures, the priest, the authority figures, who were like, these boys would have run around and done whatever they wanted, right? So I created this scene wherein Moses comes back into the palace gallery of gods and looking for Ramesses. When Moses comes in, he wanders around and says, like, Ramesses, I want to talk to you. We should settle this getting dark, these choices that we have. And then he starts talking to the statue of Anubis. And he says, I remember a time when we used to play a trick on the priests, and we would switch the heads of the gods. And then dad would find out and he would scream at the priest, and the priest would get upset, and they would notice that it was us who did it. And then we would get in trouble and we'd go back and dad would scold us. That was a great time. And then the statue answers him, yeah, that was fun, except that I was the one who got in trouble and you never get in trouble because you were younger, and dad actually punished me instead of that. It was like, yeah, but you gotta admit that was fun. And then Ramesses' head peeks in, yeah, that was. And then he would hop down, and then he would say, and then they would have a laugh, right? And they would say, you remember this other time when we decided to reroute parts of the river and then like this, and so that we can make mud, and kind of like, and everybody's robes got muddy because it was part of the process. So it was like, yeah, I know, that was crazy. And they related to each other as brothers. So I made up this story because I had nothing else to do. Nobody was giving me actual. And I pitched that with just 3 or 4 drawings. I just told the story like I'm telling you. No, very little drawing. As a storyboard artist, I should have had more drawing. And I tell the story, and I tell the story to the story supervisors, and they felt like, wow, uh, we should get the directors. And then the directors show up. It's like, wow, we got to get the producers. And then the producers, like my tiny office, got filled with all these people who were making the movie. And they all started chatting like crazy. Oh, this is wonderful. Of course, they would be doing this. They're laughing and they're crazy. And they're wonderful. Like, oh my God, good job. And they all leave. And I was like, what just happened?
What did just happen?
And Brenda says, good job, Ronnie. You did it. You mean you wanted me to do that? Yeah, that's what you're here to do. Oh, then on, the ability to actually be participating in making a movie that isn't open to you when you're doing TV because you're not supposed to say anything. But in animated features, all of you are writing the movie, all of you are creating the movie. And that my idea as being someone who's grown up in the Philippines as being like, do the job that you are asked to do.
I was
I
gonna
didn't
say, yeah.
understand. I do not know that I didn't know that I was stepping across the line, other than being reckless to feel like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do now, but I just do whatever. And I felt like, I'm going to tell you a story about this, about brothers. And the fact that when you're writing and creating that, you're using essentially your own life as a laboratory for
Yeah.
what becomes an authentic human moment that people can relate to. They can relate to it. And then that means it humanizes the characters. They felt like, oh, it was wonderful. We got to put this in the beginning of the movie. That story you told of them when they were younger, we should show that. So they rewrote the beginning of the movie because of that. And then from then on, I was being cast as the person who does these things. I felt like it's not fully written, not figure free, give it to Ronnie. We don't know the general lay of it. Like, well, let it be sketchy, give it to this guy. And then also I felt like there's an emotional part of the story. It's like, give it to this guy. Nobody wants to do those things because they're not fun. There's not a fight sequence. There's no runaway train. There are no monsters after you, but it's just 2 people in a room having to discuss something difficult. They give those to me. So it's like I got known as the guy who's like, this guy, he's gonna, because why? His career really is about 2 people talking in a room.
That's incredible. I was also gonna say, like, I think that maybe because you said it was about, being raised in the Philippines and just following instructions. There's also the immigrant thing.
Yeah, you're
You
not
know,
supposed to be
you're not,
heard.
yeah.
You're not going to solve people's problems that way because I just do the practical, bare bones, necessary thing. But the kind of liberation that I was given, permission, was a permission I wasn't giving myself. Not that I haven't heard that you're supposed to do that. It's just that I didn't allow myself to do that. It was always the job, but I just didn't feel that that's not for me to do. That's why you hire these people who were writers, right? To write.
Right.
Um, I wasn't going to write it. For the longest time in my career, all I wanted to do was not be in the crosshairs of solving the problems because you pay a lot of people bigger bucks to be able to solve the problem. Are you, why am I going to solve the problem? And then when I actually do solve the problem, they feel like, oh my God. So from then on, I get promoted.
That's great.
Yes. And I'm gonna feel like, why are you promoting me? I barely know how to do this job. It's like, oh, you're gonna be fine. No, I'm not gonna be fine. I don't know how to. Why am I gonna be the supervisor of a story team? I am the least qualified people in the studio to be able to do it. Oh, I think you can do it. Yeah, sure. And then I do it.
Did that ever change for you? Like, did you get more and more confident as time went on, or do you still feel like
No, I am always talking myself out of a job when because that is not only my position, knowing my place in the Philippines. We learn by example of our elders. Our authority figures tend to want to make sure that you don't overstep your bounds, but when you show initiative, there are certain leaders who want to count you for that. But then
yeah,
not everybody is like that. But at the same time, I think that culturally, and here I get on my soapbox, culturally in the Philippines, we believe that we are predominantly the service industry. We export our nurses, we export our laborers, and all that. But our creatives, excel kind of out of necessity, not because it's a feature, right, of us. That there's a certain kind of subversiveness to being creative, that you're supposed to subvert the rules because being creative is someone who's going to be able to think right outside of the locus of points that people are used to. You're also going to disagree with the direction of things in order to discover something new. That's not something that culturally I have been modeled to do that by elders. And then also, if you think, and here I make a point that being colonized for 300 years by our superiors or betters, wherein we're supposed to be the labor
yeah,
and the people who do not excel in those ways. We like to smile in order to disarm who are our betters so that we won't be punished or we will be given favors. And we accommodate to whatever the choice of whoever our superiors are has got to be the right choice. And whatever my thoughts are, I'm going to keep them to myself. It's not a great position given that we don't have colonists anymore, but it persists.
it does.
It's hard to get rid of. If it wasn't for, to answer your question in a roundabout way, if it wasn't for my colleagues who insist that I actually deserve not only to be given more, but to be able to discover the edges of what I believe is my abilities to expand them, I wouldn't nominate myself for it because that's my cultural stance. And I don't get cocky. I don't ask for things that I feel is not mine, but I'm being given those things. And that's the lucky part. But if it was up to me, I would demur. I'd feel like, no, 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 this is, you should hire people with the pedigree for this. But over the years, I get to be part of not only productions, but I get lauded for things that I had done that I would still say yes, but it was because it was collaboration. And we're like, no, people says that was you. Yes, I'll get shy and they're like, yes, I accept it. But this reflex of counting myself out, this is what I grew up with. It's hard to let go
It
of.
does. Yeah, it is really hard to let go of that, and I think that is a lesson like a lot of Filipino creatives, not Filipino creatives, just Filipinos in general.
Filipinos in general have to be able to step into that square that is their truth and that you're supposed to be here. You occupy not only space, but you are right to be here and to be counted, and that your voice matters.
Right, like
Um,
fight for the promotion that you believe you deserve, not
Yes, I mean,
because
even
someone will fight for that promotion who is less deserving.
sometimes, right? And
Yeah.
also, I will definitely make mistakes. I am going to plod forward and face plant many times. But as someone who came from that culture, I'm not allowed mistakes. So I better stay in moves and behaviors that are sure to be pleasing.
Yeah.
So I don't believe in that now. In the preponderance of this career, telling me that that isn't true, and I'm supposed to let go of these very self-defeating behaviors. I can stand in my own truth better now than I used to, but I still have to battle my reflex to say, oh no, I know what the center stage is. That's not for me. That's for someone else. It was like, oh yeah, my name's on the docket. I'm supposed to be there, but yeah, I'm still apologizing. That's not great. You slow down your own career, and you're supposed to make mistakes. That's how you learn. Um, so damn the torpedoes and claim what's yours.
Was it easier in a place like Digicon where it was, you were center stage, but you are also in front of your fellow countrymen?
Yeah, it's easier because I have evidence. I can't just openly say these things without actual things to back
Yeah.
it up. I like talking in front of my own people. I want them to listen, but I know that the challenge is that it sounds fantastic, outlandish. The process that I want them to embrace does not feel like it's what they want because my creative process, persisting and failing and recobbling things together and pursuing things over and over again, um, it's not known in the industries that I will be talking in the Philippines because they know that once somebody writes it and somebody blesses it and then you make it, it is what it is. But to me, writing is an ongoing evolution of
Mhm.
creation, and that you're supposed to dig really deep inside yourself to use whatever truth that you know and test it over and over again. Not because it's supposed to be done, but because it's supposed to be speaking about the things that you feel it should speak about. And if it's failing that, you should keep trying as much as you can. To be done is not the goal. What you're supposed to do is actually complete this journey to your satisfaction that you had transformed your little idea into something that actually excavates something about you, your limitations, your failures, your something about us that isn't readily easy to uncover. And that if it's uncomfortable for your characters to go through this, it's uncomfortable for your audiences to face it, that maybe the movie is surprising as opposed to predictable because
This
it was not easy to arrive at.
this is where I bring up the fact that you wrote Inside Out.
I was part of, and see here I'm doing it again. I'm part of the creative team. I have to say it that broke that story, but I was also right at the very heart of it as to what is valuable about the characters' journeys. That if I wasn't manning those stations, it would be a different story because it would be a different person there.
It was
But
be a
because
different
I was
person
because
managing it. Yeah.
managing it, saying yes, no, maybe what, sacrificing good ideas for okay ideas or vice versa. But because I was there, I will say yes, I am I am there writing the movie, influencing it every day, even if I was just nodding to it or saying no to something or doubting something. That's part of writing too. That is how you behave in a production. It isn't a conveyor belt of stages. It's all collaboration. It goes back and forth. It goes back into the beginning. It goes back to the end and goes back to the beginning. And then the people who are in charge of saying yes or no to it have to sift through all manner of opinions and choices And we are the only prism that says that this movie is getting better. Who can tell?
It
Why?
it's
Because it's valuable to me that this is the story we're telling. I don't know if the audiences are going to laugh, cry, or feel anything, but it feels like this is the values we were trying to unearth. And it's very hard to do. And then you get your validation when the opening weekend becomes what it is. It feels like that was a long, hard fought bet that can only be proven by audiences responding.
and
But a long time, it's just courage, tenacity, stupidity that you're holding that this is going to be great. Trust me. No, don't trust me. I don't know what I'm doing.
did you get involved in Inside Out as it was going, or did you end up were you one of
Oh,
the
no,
people
I
who
was
pitched
there
it?
from the very
Yeah,
beginning. From the very beginning, when Pete pitched it, I was right by his side from the very beginning. He pitched me Inside Out as an idea when I visited him in the house because we were neighbors. So Ryan, I have this idea. And we would have whiskey and or cigars. So it was like, I have this thing. And I was like, and he told me, it's like, what? We just made up. It's about an old man flying this house full of balloons. That was hard. Now, you want to tell a movie about a little girl's emotions inside her head? Sure. That's going to be even harder. And it was from the
I
very beginning.
honestly I feel like you could have done anything with Up after the first 10 minutes, and people would have still loved it.
Oh, no. That was a movie that everybody doubted all the way because they felt like
An old man.
it's an action movie with an old man, talking dog, Cub Scout, and balloons. I don't know if anyone's going to buy that.
It's an excellent movie.
I
Uh,
feel very proud of that movie because of the sacrifices that we did for a movie that not everybody got right away because it wasn't obvious
because it was an old man.
because they couldn't see it.
Yeah.
They didn't understand that this was an old man punishing himself for
Mm-hmm.
not being what he thought was a better husband. And nobody will make an animated feature about someone who's doing that to themselves. Nobody. If it wasn't for the fact that we were charming them for most of the movie, that they understood that, yeah, he was beating himself up most of the time
Beating himself up for surviving, basically.
for feeling like my wife had these great aspirations in life and I didn't deliver.
Yeah.
I failed her. That to me feels like that's not an animated feature.
It's
Why
hard
would anyone want to make an animated feature about that? But we felt it that way. When people tell you what's supposed to be made, I've had a career wherein so far I've been part of movies wherein these movies really couldn't be made in the traditional general sense of making animated features. Nobody can pitch that today and say that would be a winner. No, still to this day, that's not an instant like. Nobody will. What? What's that? Why would be that? But that only now is proven, yes. But back then, nobody can see it.
Well, I will say that as much as everybody talks about the first 10 minutes of that movie, my favorite part of the movie is in the middle of the movie when he's going through the album, when he's
That's
going,
those are both of those parts are mine.
yeah, both of those parts. Yeah.
I
So,
made both of those.
so how do you like being the source of everybody crying?
I like it other than it's now a cliche. Um, but now they expect it all the time. They feel like, I can do a runaway train too, or rocket ships exploding. It's not like it's the only thing I do.
Do you expect
But
that opening sequence to be as heartbreaking as it was to people?
it we knew when I pitched those boards that we were treading on uh, a depiction of a life that is not um, gonna be for the usual audience. I drew one of the scenes I drew wherein she's at the doctor's office where she's crying, her head is in her hands. And that I drew the chart of a fetus in the
Hmm.
back. This is part of the storyboard to communicate very simply that they had hoped to have a child because she painted the nursery, and the stork arriving. And the next scene is that she's crying her eyes out at the doctors, and I drew the fetus position as the chart, like a birth chart. And I say, she lost her child. We knew that we were going to say that, but I'm going to show it. If we were going to toy with that idea that, yeah, we pitch it that she lost a child, we're like, no, but you're going to visually see that she's crying her heart out, and that the doctor essentially is like, I'm sorry, is what he's saying,
Yeah.
even though there's no dialogue, because I was in charge of it, not having dialogue. They gave it to me. And it feels like if you are going to be allergic to this notion in an animated feature, this is the one that's going to make you say, no, we're not going to do that. But nobody backed down because they saw the rest of the story. It's like, no, this is what breaks their hearts
Yeah.
as a couple. Nothing else would do the same thing. If you're placed with something else, it'll feel like you failed.
That's true.
But that was a tough. If they were going to go and say that that opening scene is going to tell that story, and not only that, she dies,
Yeah.
right? I drew her climbing that hill and not making it. Like if we were going to object, this isn't about Bambi's mom. We saw her as a little girl. Come on,
It's a
and then a funeral,
masterpiece. It's a
and a
masterpiece
funeral
of
scene,
storytelling. Yeah.
and it's a funeral scene afterwards. So I was in charge of that. And I'm in charge of him opening the books at the end of his journey while in this empty house. And both those moments affected me, that it makes me cry. And I did it, the end of it, because my dad was sick and he couldn't talk anymore. I channeled my father and making that sequence. But I didn't know that they were going to want it. I just felt like you guys might think this is too much. And they kept it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but it wasn't a usual assignment. It's not something that you feel like, well, you go to animation school and want to start your storyboard. Well, you're going to go on superheroes and, cats and mice chasing each other and, mallets and frying pans into their head. That's fine. But this is this is not the usual.
But
And
I feel like the Ronnie Del Carmen of 1999 would not have taken the risk of boarding something that he thinks the
oh,
executives will have turned down.
it was a risk. It definitely was. It was not an easy choice to say, we want this. You have to convince so many people to want that. It's an everyday, they want it one day, they'll get scared of it tomorrow, they'll keep it and then they'll cut it. There's so many things that could go wrong,
Mhm.
and you could lose it. That's it's not a done deal when somebody says, yeah, we keep it, tomorrow, oh, no. Yeah, yeah, I like it. I was like, no, I don't like it. Oh, people have objections. I was like, oh, no, no. The audience, the parents didn't like. This inside out, they feel like, this is too much for our kids. It's too sophisticated inside out. And then the kids, we interviewed the kids. We love it. This is what sadness was doing. And it was like, well, the parents were insecure that their children were learning about emotions that they feel that they want to educate their kids about, but they were in control of those ideas.
Yeah.
We kind of went over their heads and told them about what emotions are. And
Well,
they didn't like the fact that this is just too much for my kid. He's not going to understand it. When we talk to your kid, he seems to understand it. Why?
we kids
So
are way smarter than we give them credit for.
definitely, they're very, very intuitive, and they're like grown-ups, only in little bodies.
Is Inside Out your proudest moment?
For me, it's both up and inside out. I can't leave either one of them because it was both a picture that Pete and I worked on together heavily. But it also, there's a lot of me in both movies.
Hmm.
It's not just the job of having performed, but actually pieces of me are in there. Um, so in that way, as someone who eventually gets nominated for writing, someone I just draw for a living kind of person, it's a long journey of having the world confer on me their judgment that you're right, you create. And I feel like, wow, isn't that crazy? It's like no one else is surprised.
You got that validation.
Yes, right. It takes a while, but yeah, that's me. I do that.
I believe Inside Out is now being taught in schools to help teach kids about emotions, right?
Yeah, I went to a symposium of neurologists, psychologists, and brain leaders in New York after the movie came out, and they hosted me. I did a talk in their convention, and they told me in so many words that what our profession is to be able to help a public, our public that we serve, so that they can make sense of what it is that they're going through in their minds, in their brains, and in their emotions. And you guys come along and create something that made that conversation so much more clear and easier that none of us can do with all the millions of patients that we will see. The movie distills it in a way that people can walk around with a broad stroke understanding that your emotions are not you.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be driving you. You have a choice on what to do. And that also you can describe your emotions as something that happens to you so that it will change the language when you either discuss, argue, or contend. I feel that I am frustrated by this situation. So you separate your I from your feel, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to, you can say, I'm frustrated. I'm angry.
Mm-hmm.
No, I feel that this frustration, or I am feeling this anger because of my frustration with what's happening. The other thing to find out is the other person also don't know what to do with their emotion. Will will say things that they don't understand they're going through. And so it every day, in spite of me also always losing my cool and being frustrated, saying the wrong things, I still feel like I could have said that better. I should have said, this situation is frustrating me.
Yeah.
And it's better for me not to say or make decisions right now about it.
Well, that
But
actually is interesting to me because you are a Filipino and you're from a generation higher than mine. And even in my generation, I kind of feel like boys are not really allowed to feel, uh,
but yeah, but you can express rage and anger.
except for rage and anger, which I have come to recently understand is like what boys end up using as a filter for other emotions.
It's a way of um there's a romance to it. There's a romantic notion about rage and anger in the culture. I believe, I don't know how universal it is in other cultures, but the permission to become enraged comes from being pushed to a certain limit wherein you are now entitled to rage. Of course you got angry. Of course you lashed out. Of course you used those words because you got enraged and nobody can blame you. Actually, that's not true, right? Somebody has to tell you. And I had to learn this. I'm an old person arguing with either my friends or other people, strangers, my wife and kids. It's like, I'm angry and I'm frustrated with you, but you're acting out what your feelings are. You're not entitled. This is not, this not, you're not, this is not your permission.
You're still hurting other people.
You're going to say and do things that are unfair and uncalled for. There's no call for it. In fact, the calmer you are to be able to walk away from the situation that becomes volatile is better. Discuss it without being angry would be nicer. Discuss it to the point that you can at least agree on certain things about the situation so that you can come back to it. Maybe better the relationship so that we don't do this again. Might be good, right?
Mm-hmm.
But because there's a romance to being a man, and your rage is kind of emblematic of being a man. You acted out and became tough, and showed somebody how you can humble them with your strength or your anger or with your fists or other weapons. It shouldn't be that way because that's going to hurt. Not only you're going to cause more damage to yourself. But before, that was kind of a badge that boys kind of like, yeah, if somebody wrongs you, you're allowed to behave, to lash out, to fight. And you felt insulted, you feel like, and then you had to punch. Um, it's hard to teach that because the society has allowed for that to be true and validated. And I don't know how to curb it because it's not looked upon as being manly to walk away from a fight.
But that brings me to my question about working on Inside Out. Like, given that particular background, was working on Inside Out particularly cathartic for you?
Uh, Being able to talk to experts who had made the distinction of what emotions are in human beings
Mm-hmm.
was very sobering. That I wish that I knew it before. I'm also ashamed that oh my God, I walk and talk like this. This is me. Really, you have to confront it, right? And I still do it, right? I feel like because it's habitual. And I'm like, oh my God, when I lose my temper, we get frustrated. You have to try and curb your um, inclination to lash out, to be snarky, to belittle, berate. Make sure that you can have the argument without, I don't want to be called on. And if I was ever having a conversation or an argument, let's just say, wherein I was unfair, unjust, and belittling and had snide remarks that was personal. Let's
Yeah.
talk about the issue. Let's talk about what's going on, and say what you feel about what's going on, the issue at hand. But don't ever direct it at the other person because it'll be an entirely different conversation. It becomes personal. Then now you're not going to arrive on anything. You're not going to agree on anything. That's hard to do because if you're in a culture, because I'm in a work culture wherein it's very, you're liable for language that way. You have to have training that says that you cannot do this in personal because in the creative industry, you're working ideas when you agree and disagree all the time.
Yeah.
Uh, if you take it personally, you won't be allowed back in the room because you just made it personal. We can disagree that I don't want to do it that way. I feel like it should be this. And it's like, well, I think right now I have to make a decision. We're going to do it this way until it stops making sense. And well, I'm glad that you said it, but thank you. But if you were the person who's like, well, I'm right and I don't care what you say, and then slam the door, you just stop the conversation.
I feel like I work in corporate, so there are certain rules for tact and all of that stuff. I do feel like working in creatives is like, while those rules may ostensibly be there, emotions are probably running so much higher.
I always applaud it that emotions can manifest itself without it being um, unjust, unfair, or be attacking, right? Because I've been in rooms wherein people don't agree, and these are high-powered writers, There are rooms where it just runs hot, right? It becomes completely kind of, wow, the emotions are running high. But being a person in those rooms, I can call to kind of like, okay, this is getting much livelier than I need it to be.
Hmm.
Let's take a break, right? I've been in writers' rooms where it's like, these are really amazing writers, right? And they behave really well when they disagree. So I was like, and some of them are not. Some of them are kind of like really snarky and belittling and kind of wanted to signal status. And I was like, oh my God, where did this guy learn manners? And I don't want to work with that person anymore. There's a consequence to it.
Yeah.
So it may not be immediate, but there's a consequence. So I like to be invited into every room if I can to discuss things. And also, we don't have to make this decision today wherein somebody's right or wrong. We're airing what we need to air out as opinions, and I can be completely wrong. I don't mind it that I'm completely wrong, but I'm going to say it.
I like that the Ronnie Del Carmen of now would like to be invited into every room.
Well, that's now the game. I describe this now to most people that this is my sport. The writer's room is a sport. If you have the right players, it's really lively. It's fantastic.
That's great.
Uh, I was in a I was an observer with Pete Docter. We were doing Inside Out. We were in the writer's room. Seth was the head writer then, and Bill Hader had invited us, and we were in the writing room from Tuesday to Saturday, watching them work. I feel that being part of a writer's room is really one of the greatest kind of privileges of being a creative. And things like, I want to keep playing with this person, right? And I want to hear it that somebody says, "Can I invite you back into?" And I've been invited to writers' rooms. So I was like, are you going to be here in town a little longer? No, I'm going to. I was like, oh, we have another writers' room. I think you should be in that one. I was like, oh, I would like to. Feels good, right? To be invited. Who's someone who's not known to be writing what needs to be in a writer's room. So it's like I like the energy that you provide and the comments and how to work of flowing the ideas here and there. I was like, great. It's not drawing where I started, but this is nice. That's my sport. I don't need to be right. I have a passion for these ideas. I want it to grow. If it grows in the direction that I feel it should go, great. If it starts to bend, let's follow that too and see where that goes. Who knows?
Well, how do you feel
And
about Inside Out 2 being the biggest animated movie of all time?
I applaud it because that for one thing, they deserve it because they work really hard on it. They called me back last year in December, and I told them it's like, it's close to Christmas. I'm in Manila. Yeah, can you? Because we were talking like, I'm gonna call you. So it's like, oh, January? Yeah, sure, after the holidays. And then they called back. It's like, no, actually, we should. Can you come in before Christmas? It's like, what are we talking about before Christmas? What weeks are we talking about? Yeah, I think we need you now. Like, okay, all right. So I spent like almost 2 weeks in the studio, and they gave me the whole movie to look at. So it's like Pete was saying, I just want you to give you a reaction and what would you do with this and that and arrange things and kind of like, so we workshopped and I wrote and I storyboarded and then I did what I can. And so I was like, if you like any of these things, sure. You like none of it, I'm sorry, but you already paid me. And so I did work on it. So I have 2 credits in the movie. It's great.
How different was the movie before you came in and after you came in?
I don't know, which is very lame for me because I haven't seen the movie, because I tend not to. But I like that the audiences are responding so well. People were so welcoming at the Pixar when I came to do that work. They kind of like, oh, I'm so glad you're here. The movie needs you. Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, you should be. It's like, oh, we miss you here. They're like, great, thank you. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but we'll see. But they're very generous. and I did try, do my best to help out, however and whatever it is that I did that they used, of course they're very welcome to it, whatever it is, and if it helped, thank goodness. Whatever it is I helped, and I feel like I'm very proud of the movie and how it's being received. So I feel that audiences are ready to forget the pandemic and go to movies again, hopefully. And this was the right movie to signal it.
Your first love is comics, and you made your name in animation. Would you say you favor one over the other, or is it equal to
I
you?
like my profession now, being in movies. I still like the idea that I am a comic book dabbler. Uh, I have aspirations that I can still make a comic book because there's something about the fuller control over it. But it's tedious to make a comic book. It's just like, man, why is this so slow? Why is it so hard to make a comic book? But I love the European bande dessinée, the big
Yeah.
format, small panels. A lot of the friends I met in Europe and France who make these, it feels like, well, that's pretty good. You can make real epic stories. But I'm thinking of like, my God, these things mm, hard to do. They
You
take as long as making a movie, and that was so hard to make.
you got to draw a background, you got to draw it again. You got
It's just not it's not I didn't get faster at it. I like making them, but they also become a burden of kind of like, oh yeah, I can redraw the first page again, and oh, that pose, I can rethink it and redo it again. I'm like, oh yeah.
oh
Because I happen to be kind of exacting, and I feel like, "Oh, I want to do that. I want to make this again." I still feel like I want to do another comic book for because there's things that when I've done two the Harley and Ivies have done two 8-pagers. Between Henry Gilroy and myself, we did two of the Hercmondos,
hmm.
which is that alien hunter character, that muscle-bound guy. And then I'm thinking, it's like, what is that? It's a curse where I can't make a third one. I can't. I feel like if Paul Dini had another Harley and Ivy 8-pager, I'd like to do it. Or if Henry and I are always dancing around the idea of like, let's make a third Herc Mondo, for Dark Horse. But like, yeah, we'll never. It's too hard. We're old now.
I was at the Philippine International Comics Festival a few weeks ago. I hosted some of the panels. It took place the weekend before San Diego,
Mm,
and I think half of the exhibitors were women. And I was like, "This is
that's what it
amazing!
is.
What
It is amazing.
happened?"
Yes, it's the same thing. I mean, this was years ago. I was still at Pixar, and Cal Arts was reporting that 70% of their enrollment are female. 70.
70.
And I'm saying this is great because that's going to change the landscape of the creators who gets to make movies because it's usually dominated by boys. So that the stories themselves become different.
Right.
We've heard what the boys do, which is great. It's time for the females to be able to step
Yeah.
up, and because they're there and you're going to listen to them because they're the ones who make these things. And that's great. Those stories should show up because these
Yeah.
industries are always very male dominated, and I'm frankly bored with those stories already, and I feel like I need to hear something else.
I think there's a certain faction of the population always kind of freaks out whenever a woman gets on something.
It's they're the usual indignation and the hackles are raised and the insecurity and feeling like that's
But
not what it used to be. And I'm
right.
thinking, yeah, but why does it always have to be that way? Is the conversation. And what are you afraid of if they actually do have their voice and say? You lose nothing. Why
Right.
do you think that why do you feel that you're losing something if they are in the picture?
Eh,
Doesn't take anything away from you.
right. And it's like let's say the basic premise of Up or the basic premise of Inside Out. If a woman was in charge of that, it's a completely different movie.
It'll be different, right? It'll be from a demeanor that is going to be strange for a man. When we are growing up with story people, we always used to ask, like, can we have female story artists? And there's not as many, but there are now. They have been there all this time. But what's fascinating is that when you are brainstorming and you're coming up with stories, solutions, ideas, gags, if you pitch it and it's just all boys, you're
Hmm.
laughing at the same thing, right? It's like, it isn't good.
Right.
What is no fun? And then if you have females in the room, some of them myself like, that only makes sense if you're a boy. What? Oh, I can't consider it because I am a boy. I don't see the
Exactly.
world that way. But if somebody tells you from the female side, they're like, oh, it's only funny if you're all our audiences are men and women, right? And I'm telling a joke from a man's point of view, and it's funny that side, but I didn't consider it won't be funny on the other side. Or if the joke is offensive, let's just say,
Right. Or
right?
conversely, like you could make a joke that, wait, like I can't do this because this will be offensive to women, and then a woman will tell you, actually, it's not, and it's
It's
actually
not,
funny.
right? Yes. Be able to say, oh, you have permission. This is great. This is great. And I'm like, okay, I don't have to worry about that. That is what I think the boon is, but most people who feel insecure about that, I feel are losing sight of what's valuable in having a diverse lineup of voices who are creating because it's been too one-sided for too long.
Yeah.
So
My last question is, what is next for Ronnie Del Carmen?
I am always flinging myself into the arms of fate. I write, I create, I pitch. I like to go home to the Philippines and Manila and have meetings with people who are in the industry, who are storytellers, directors, and writers, producers. We talk about what if, right? I do that here in the Bay Area, and I meet with people. It's like, what if, I have the story. What if? I'll pitch it. Maybe somebody will like it. Maybe somebody won't. It's um, it's the journey of being a creative person in the industry of making movies or anything creative. It's like this is not your day-to-day job. It's not a 9 to 5 wherein you get results as to, oh yeah, somebody's paying you every day to show up.
Mhm.
No, what I am tasking myself every day is that I still am the person that made those movies, and I'm continuing to write and create movies for myself. And I will at some point be able to pitch it to some people. I meet with producers, feels like I have something, oh, I want to hear it, I want to see it. It's like takes a long time. And if any one of these projects become real, then I guess I'm making that, right? And then I hope to be able to see it in the theaters with you guys, or maybe it's a book release, maybe it's a comic book. But I think that I'm not only more myself now than I ever am, but I'm also finally liberated from all these little demons that I used to keep beside me that make me doubt about why I like certain things or why I want to make something. I've already done enough that feels like I gave at the office where those doubts used to flourish. I feel that I give myself permission to become the creator that I've always wanted to be, which is myself. And there are people who listen. So, and then maybe that becomes something someday. I hope so. So that's what I'm doing. I mean, I say this now, it's like I might actually do a pitch later this month, and the next thing you know, it's like I'm attached to a studio making something because they liked it. I felt like, oh gods, you really want that, huh? All right, then. I guess we're making that. I was just kidding around, and
I had this other thing in the back pocket that I actually wanted more.
because I mean, that's the idea of what I've learned from friends who are performers or actors. I didn't set my career to be a performer, but I'm a voice actor, and I get hits for being a voice actor now. They're like, but I'm not auditioning every day. And I'm like, that's not happening. But if something comes along, yeah, sure. Actors are always showing up for auditions, parts they won't get.
Did you
Writers are writing on spec things that won't get produced, but you're writing.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing. You're always writing.
That's why you're a writer and not.
Yes, and you can't help yourself anyway.
Yeah.
You wake up one day, it's like, oh God, like 3 in the morning, like, oh God, I don't want to write that because I want to go back to sleep. Ah, shoot. I have to write it down. I don't want to write it. Man, I'm right. Okay, what was that again? Yeah, okay. Well, I'm gonna look at it in the morning. Of course, it's crap. You write in the morning. I was like, what did I write? Oh, what was that idea again? And you chase it, and you drop it, and you chase it. You write it again. It's like, wow, this is really something. Oh, it's becoming something. You pitch it to a friend. It's like, oh, I like this idea. You like that? You want to write it together? It's like, yeah, let's do it. That's how it is. You're always creating. You don't call on it and it shows up. Sometimes it just shows up, and then you don't have a choice. You have to write it. It doesn't show up whole either. You have to work on it. So that's what I like about now. It's just I'm eternally always inspired, and I'm always writing and rewriting things. I'm a pain to watch movies with my wife because afterwards I was like, I like that movie, but I liked it better if they had actually changed something in the midpoint and then towards the end of the second act, the character said this instead of that. Then it means that they twist the knife so that it be more potent when they have the ending. And now for 10 minutes, the thing that they said in the first act, I really wanted that to come back and they didn't bring it back. Would have been really awesome. And then you go like, we just watched the movie. Let me enjoy this movie.
You can't turn it off.
It's hard to do it. It's hard to do it. So,
Ronnie Del,
that's good.
Ronnie Del Carmen, I think your story is very inspiring. From someone who didn't think they were going to get into creatives, and from someone who originally just wanted to follow instructions and do the job. I think that where you got to and where you are now is like a real success story. And I think
Thank you. I think so now. It took me a long time to be convinced, but I'm very grateful for the journey.
thank you so much for joining the Comics Cube.
All right,
This
thank
was very
you.
good.